The this keyword is an extremely important concept to understand in JavaScript, and many beginners find it especially difficult. But don't worry, it's actually not that hard if you know exactly how the this keyword works. So the this keyword, or this variable, is basically a special variable that is created for every execution context, and therefore any function. In fact, we learned before that it's one of the three components of any execution context, along with the variable environment and scope chain that we already learned about before. Now, in general terms, the this keyword will always take the value of the owner of the function in which the this keyword is used. We also say that it points to the owner of that function. And that sounds very abstract, but we will see what that means in a second. For now, what's very important to understand is that the value of the this keyword is not static, so it's not always the same. It depends on how the function is actually called, and its value is only assigned when the function is actually called. So it's very different from a normal value in this regard. If we set, for example, x to 5, then x will always just be 5. But the this keyword, again, depends on the way in which a function is called. But what does that actually mean? Well, let's analyze 4 different ways in which functions can be called. And the first way to call a function is as a method, so as a function attached to an object. So when we call a method, the this keyword inside that method will simply point to the object on which the method is called. Or, in other words, it points to the object that is calling the method. Okay? And so let's illustrate this with a simple example. So the method here is the calc_h method, again, because it's a function attached to the Jonas object. In the last line here, we then call the method, and as you see, inside the method, we use the this keyword. Now, according to what we just learned, what should be the value of the this keyword here? And that's right, it should be Jonas, because that is the object that is calling the method down there in the last line, isn't it? And so then, on Jonas, we can of course access all the properties that it has, and so this.year will become 1989, because that's Jonas.year as well. So in this case, writing Jonas.year would have the exact same effect as this.year. But doing it this way is a way better solution, for many reasons that we will get into throughout the course. And we will play around with this example a bit more in the next video. But anyway, another way we call functions is by simply calling them as normal functions, so not as a method, and so not attached to any object. In this case, the this keyword will simply be undefined. However, that is only valid for strict mode. So if you're not in strict mode, this will actually point to the global object, which in case of the browser is the window object. And that can be very problematic, and so this is yet another very good reason to always use strict mode. Next, we have arrow functions. And while arrow functions are not exactly a way of calling functions, it's an important kind of function that we need to consider. Because remember, arrow functions do not get their own this keyword. Instead, if you use the this variable in an arrow function, it will simply be the this keyword of the surrounding function, so of the parent function. And in technical terms, this is called the lexical this keyword, because it simply gets picked up from the outer lexical scope of the arrow function. So never ever forget this very important property of arrow functions. Believe me that actually I run into 1 or 2 bugs because of this behavior. Okay, so it's really important not to forget that arrow functions do not get their own this keyword. Okay, and finally, if a function is called as an event listener, then the this keyword will always point to the DOM element that the handler function is attached to. Very straightforward, right? Now, the this keyword is usually a big source of confusion for beginners. But if you know these rules, then it should become a lot simpler. And to make it even simpler, it's also important to know what the this keyword is not. So this will never point to the function in which we are using it. Also, the this keyword will never point to the variable environment of the function. And these are two pretty common misconceptions, and so that's why I'm addressing them here. Okay? So again, the rules that I showed you here is all that you need to know. Alright, and now just for the sake of completion, there are actually other ways in which we can call a function. For example, using the new keyword or the call, apply, and bind methods. But we don't know yet what any of these are, and so I will talk about how the this keyword works with them when the time comes. Anyway, that's it for this lecture, so let's now use this in practice to make it crystal clear.